As well as its secular uses, chat is used here by Muslim mystics to help them on their spiritual journey. But perhaps it's not a surprise that there should be such a strong Muslim population here. After all, it's only a short hop across the Red Sea to Yemen and Saudi Arabia. But what is remarkable is the role the Muslim population played in maintaining Ethiopia's independence, shoring up the relationship between Ethiopian Christianity and royal legitimacy. Back in the 17th century, Ethiopian Muslims made common cause with Ethiopian Christians in a deal brokered by Emperor Fasciladas. I'm heading to his capital to find out more about him and the Ethiopian kingdom he ruled over. I'm traveling to Gondar across Lake Tana on the ancient trade route which avoids the mountains. The unlikely alliance of Christians and Muslims came about as a reaction against foreign interference. During the 16th century, the Portuguese arrived with two purposes in mind. One was to take over the Muslim trade routes. The other was to find a mythical Christian ruler called Prester John. They travelled right down the west coast of Africa in search of him. And then when the boat technology improved, they came up the east coast. And it was here in Ethiopia, that they thought that they'd found him. Prester John turned out to be a figment of European imagination. Instead, the Portuguese found a real Ethiopian Christian kingdom. And whilst they enjoyed some success in converting the local population to Catholicism, their attempts angered many. A foreign imported version of Christianity united Ethiopian Christian and Muslim alike under the banner of Emperor Fasciladas. They expelled the Portuguese and executed their Jesuit priests. Ethiopian traditions were again free from outside influence. Some seem unchanged to this day. Papyrus canoes like this one have been used here for thousands of years. Could you ask him if he's caught anything today? Oh.
You are... I know someone. Yes, one more. Yeah. So you can buy the fish?
They can buy the fish? How much for them? What kind of fish is this?
Tilapia.
Tilapia.
Just give him the money.
Thank you very much.
Right back again.
To the north of Lake Tana lies Gondar, Ethiopia's 17th century capital. It's dominated by an impressive castle. The city was built by Emperor Fasciladas in 1635, the man who brought Christian and Muslim together in common cause. I've arranged to meet the curator here, Getz Yigso.
Hello, sir.
Hello, Getz.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Lovely to meet you.
Good.
This is so spectacular. So what am I looking at
So
here?
you'll see a real African castle. This is really the first place black people who live in a castle. Any palace in Ghana and in Morocco, in Tunisia, such castle. This is the first and only castle.
The man who built it was determined to defend Ethiopia's independence. Getz tells me that Emperor Fasciladas was a strong leader in control of a significant capital.
Oh yeah, because in Ghana at that time there was about 60,000 inhabitants, you can imagine. That was 400 years ago. It's a big town. So we're able to imagine that he was so kind and very visionary man, very wise man. That's why he built such an edifice, an impressive castle.
Fasciladas wasn't just displaying his power with this building. There are telling clues that he was also asserting his legitimacy by reminding people of the link to King Solomon and the people of the Old Testament. Up here I can see that as a Star of David?
Right. That is the Star of David because the previous Ethiopian kingdoms believed that their families comes from the Solomonic descendants.
Yes.
They're from the same family. Fasilides was one of them. That's why he put inside.
And connection to Solomon, what was that? I mean, is it a legend or is this an actual real...
This is the real connection.
I knew that it would be difficult to separate fact from myth. Here, it seems impossible. Of course, the Star of David is only one hint that the emperors claimed to be descended from Solomon. I'm wondering whether there is anything else in this castle that points back to the world of the Old Testament. For me, the best way of getting a real sense of the building is to sit down, just spend a few quiet minutes, just sketching. I suspect that Fasilides may have been more influenced by outsiders than he would have cared to admit. The battlements look Portuguese to me, and the domes look east towards perhaps India. But I can also see what looks like a curious technique in the way the long wooden beams have been used in the stone building. I'm particularly interested in how the architect has used this beam to support the masonry, and it's a wooden beam. It's quite unusual for it to be that long. The beam's unnecessarily long for its function. My hunch is the design may be a throwback to an earlier time. It's almost like an architectural quote. To see it here in this site where they've absorbed influences from all over the neighbouring regions is absolutely fascinating. Details like the beams suggest that while there were some outside influences on the kingdom, local heritage and traditions were fundamental. And the execution of the Portuguese Jesuits shows the emperor's determination to defend the distinctive role of the Ethiopian Church. Just as in Western Europe, many of the oldest buildings still standing in Ethiopia are churches. And I feel sure these buildings can tell me about the relationship between the emperors, their faith, and their history. This church was built by Emperor Yasu, a close successor to Fasilides in the 17th century. This astonishing painting is completely different to anything I've seen in European churches or in missionary churches elsewhere in Africa. I spend so much of my time trying to rationalize and explain beautiful things, but very occasionally I'm just completely knocked sideways by something, and coming in here to this particular church and seeing a lot of the Christian tradition that I was brought up with depicted in a completely new way with a level of intensity that I've never seen before, it's just absolutely astounding. The paintings have been completed on cloth, which has been glued to the mud plaster walls. Emperor Yasu seems to have been reassuring his subjects that he could look after them. He commissioned artists to paint angels on the ceilings as if protecting the worshippers below. It's a stunning example of the individuality that the emperors were so determined to preserve. And I can't help wondering whether other telling traces of the past still survive within Ethiopia's ancient churches. It's Sunday morning, and I'm going to a service at a church far into the highlands of East Gondar.
አምላክን የወለደች በድንጋይ ስጋ በድንጋይ ሴትና ክብርት የሚወጣችን